Hi, it's Simkray here, and today I'm going to be talking about my process for planning my scripts. If you find scripts hard, then planning scripts can make it a little easier for you. A mistake I used to make when I was younger was that I would go straight into drawing my comic without planning anything, which just doesn't work for me, since I would often lose interest in carrying on the story, as I didn't really have a goal in mind for it or the characters. And if you weren't aware, I'm also dyslexic, so things like spelling and grammar aren't exactly my strong point, but it has really helped me a lot to have some kind of structure to follow when it comes to planning my scripts. Now, my method for planning my scripts is loosely based on the 7-point story structure method. However, I simplified it and made a few changes to fit Webcomics better. But if you want, you can find the original if you just Google it. My method is split up into 3 parts that make up the plot, timeline, and chapters. Starting with the plot. Now, for this method to work, there are a total of 7 questions we need to answer about our story, and this will essentially make up the main plot point. The questions are: 1. How does the story end? 2. What is the main character's normal daily routine? 3. What happens that changes the main character's normal daily routine? 4. Who is the villain or antagonist? 5. What is the threat and/or why does the threat need to be stopped? 6. How can you destroy the main character's hope? And 7. How can you build that hope back up before the end point? Now, the reason why we need to start with the ending is so that we have something to constantly work towards. It can be as simple as the main character saves the world, or ends up marrying their love interest. Just make sure to keep it simple to begin with. You're not writing the script yet, so try to answer the questions in short, snappy bullet points. We don't need to get caught up in minor details yet. Okay, so the next part is about planning your timeline. If you don't have a straightforward timeline of events, I would strongly advise listing any important events in a timeline so you can keep track of them. If you're creating your own fantasy world, make sure to include anything to do with the history of your world. It doesn't need to only be related to the main characters. If it's important to the world's history, you should include it. Examples can be when certain wars took place, when certain towns were created, etc, etc. This will help you plan your characters' backstories and make your world feel more real. Now, once we have a rough plot and timeline of events figured out, the next thing to work on is separating the story's plot into chapters. If you don't know what a plot point is, it's basically any major event that will have an effect or change the direction of your story as a whole. Which is why we originally started with answering those 7 questions from before. But sometimes I like to separate my chapters up depending on what my character's goal or motivation is for that chapter. Anyway, let's break down how to structure a chapter real quick. Now again, with the exception of your first chapter, which in my opinion should be used to introduce your characters and world, my basic structure is as follows. 1. Establish the character's goal. This goal should be smaller than your endpoint and different from it. 2. Create an interruption to temporarily stop your character from reaching their goal. This interruption can either be positive or negative, depending on the tone of your chapter, but I'll be using my own comic as an example for how I do this later, so just stick with me for a second here. 3. Have the character overcome the interruption and reach their goal in some way. And 4. This is kind of an extra part which you can choose to include, but you can set up the next goal for the following chapter at the end of your current one. Now, I'm going to show you how I follow this structure myself by using my own webcomic as an example. Obviously, I'm not going to be spoiling the ending of my own webcomic here, but if you haven't read the first 4 chapters, you should probably do that now, because I will be spoiling them in the next part. Coming up right about now. Okay, so for my own webcomic No Never Cliche, my chapters are split up like this. Chapter 1 is called Amateur, which is just about introducing the main characters and establishing the world that the story takes place in, so that the reader can essentially understand the vibe before things get wild. But you should check out my video about how to write an intro for webcomics if you would like more information about that topic specifically. Moving on, Chapter 2 is called The Mascot. Here, the main aim of the chapter is for the main characters to defeat the mascot monster. However, its secondary purpose is to establish a friendship between the 2 main characters who have just met, with the mascot taking on the role as the interruption and the main aim here. Chapter 3 is called Enrollment. The only real aim for that chapter was for Sky to enroll. However, there are a few positive interruptions that happen on her way, like her and Aki walking through the market, which is on their way to their objective. They also stop to get some food and meet some other characters, while also learning more about how the world works. All of these are what I like to call fun interruptions. But I think it's important to keep in mind that if your interruptions pushes your main characters too far from the goal you already established for them, then that can sometimes be really annoying for the reader. Like for example, the dreaded beach episodes in a lot of anime, where nothing really happens to move the plot along. And chapter 4 is called Personal Reality, which is about Sky completing her tutorial, and I'm not 100% sure when I'll be posting this video just yet, so I'm not gonna spoil the ending of this chapter, but hopefully you get the idea. If you're someone who reads my webcomic, you probably won't be able to tell what the overall ending will be yet, which is currently intentional because Nak is somewhat a long story. However, every individual chapter is like a little piece of the puzzle that will add up over time to make the ending. At least that's the aim. My personal rules are, if it doesn't add to the character world or plot, then don't include it in the plot. However, all is not lost, my dear friend, because you might just be able to fit it into the background as little Easter eggs, which is something I like to do. For me, one of the most difficult parts of making a webcomic is the script. There's just certain things I'm not able to do due to my disability. But instead of focusing on the things I can't do, I choose to play to my strengths, since that is something I can actually control to a certain extent. So don't let things you can't help hold you back from creating something fun. Anyway, that's all I got for this video today, and like with all of my videos, everything I've said here is only meant to be taken as advice. You can take and leave whatever you want as long as it works for you. This just so happened to be what worked for me, and I hope it's useful to you in some way too. If you'd like to follow me, all of my social links are in the description, and links to my webcomic, Not Another Cliche, will also be in the description below. Okay, thanks, bye.